What is up? Good to see you again, Willie.
Hey, it's great seeing you again, Jimmy. How are you doing today?
I am good. I have been taking care of a stray cat the last couple of days. So we're trying to get her to a nice little place, try to get her see a vet, things like that. So I've been doing stray cat mom things the last couple of days. So what have you been up to?
Been trying to deal with a slight little migraine that keeps sneaking back on me every now and then. But I mean, I'll be okay. I mean, it's not like it used to be. As long as I'm on my meds, I'm okay.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
That still sucks though.
No, I'll be okay. I'll be fine. It once it hits, once I get what I'm getting right here, it's like it'll just go away probably in about an hour or so. It's like it hits in the back of the eye right here, little pinch nerve and all of that.
Oh my goodness.
It used to last hours, I mean, to the point where I'll have to leave work early. This is like a decade ago. I mean, I was more out of shape back then. So things are better.
Well, good. I'm glad they're better. It sucks that you're still having headaches, though. That's gotta suck.
It happens. It's so rare. It happens maybe a couple of times a year now. I mean, considering that it happened almost daily.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it doesn't even last long when it happens. So
yeah. Okay. Well, at least that's good. Other than that, you have a good week?
Yeah, it's a fair week. I'm tired all the time. Other than that, but that's it might even be stress related from work. So
yeah, to be expected. Absolutely, absolutely. All right, you ready to get started? We've got a big show today.
Yeah, we have our very first guest.
I know. I'm excited. Really quick, good to see you. I guess Nicole Kidman is in the audience. I have no idea. So great.
Yeah, I noticed.
All right, we'll just say hello to everybody. All right, so I guess let's just get started. Let's bring her on and get this thing going. We'll get started talking about what we want to talk about today. What is up, Miss Sherry?
Hello, Jimmy. Hello, Willie. Thank you so much for having me on your show, being the first guest.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think I would have it any other way.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'm flattered that you invited me to be the first guest. So
yay! I'm excited because last week we were talking about what we're going to be talking about today, and so I just spent all week like learning about what it is. Like every time I talk to you, I learn something new. I swear, it never fails. I think I know everything, and then all of a sudden, bam! You hit me with something new.
That's
same here when she was on my show.
I'm sorry. Willie.
I said same here when you were on my show. You were a wealth of information. I enjoyed the interview.
I'm glad.
Yeah. You're so full of info.
That's what happens when you're old.
Right. Yeah. You end up knowing too much for your own good.
Yeah. Sometimes you wish you didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. But see, you're at the good age where like people my age will listen to you and be like, holy crap. Like I'm at that age right now where like I know stuff, but my like kids, like teenagers, they listen to me and they're like, you're wrong. Shut up. Go away. They just don't want to hear it. Like, but I'm right though. We don't have free healthcare.
Yeah. I know the feeling.
Yeah. You've had teenagers, so absolutely. Teenagers are the worst. What's up, Daniel Barry? Good to see you. Okay, it's Kitty. Nice to see you, Kitty. Thank you for coming by. You have you ended up with the lottery of the names, like kind of like Jeff Epstein.
Oh, it's Kitty. Okay. And Daniel Barry Sports Highlights. How are you doing today?
Yeah. Nice lottery on the names. Like we know Jeff Epstein, he does MMT activist podcast. He's a very sweet guy, teacher, has kids, just the sweetest, kindest person ever. just ended up with the crappiest lottery name ever.
Yeah, poor
Actually, I have
guy.
a funny
I
story
know.
about that.
I used to tell him, I told him, I'm like, put your name on everything. Like, even though it's got like a really bad connotation, just the search engine optimization of it alone, of people looking that name up and then accidentally finding you, off the chain. Algorithms are going to love him.
Actually, I got a funny story about bad names to have. My freshman year at East Carolina, the political science class, when the professor was calling the names of every student in the class, there was somebody in the class that had the misfortune of being named David Duke.
Oh.
And I mean, he couldn't help it. I mean, that's the combination. That's going to be a common name. Duke is a common name. David is a common name, and somebody had the misfortune of being named David Duke. Yeah. So when he was calling out the roll, and he wasn't in there the first couple of days. David Duke, David Duke, and David Duke wasn't in there. This guy, poor guy, and the professor said, I guess he must be at a Klan rally. And the class busted out laughing.
Oh, no.
Oh, my gosh.
That's horrible.
That's
when I was
so
younger and I was a teenager, because I know my name, like my name is like I'm spelled after Jimi Hendrix. When I was a teenager, I told myself when I was a grown up, I was going to find a guy. My true love was going to have the last name Hendrix, whether I made it happen or not. Like I was going to find a guy so I could have the last name Hendrix and marry him. Never happened, because I think I only met like one person named Hendrix, and he was not my type at all whatsoever. So I was like, I'm not going to marry you just for the name. I'm sorry, but I wanted to so bad, just so I can go around saying my name is Jimi Hendrix, but I still get Jimmy, which is cool. So, okay, let's get started on this. All right. So, for anybody that doesn't understand what we're going to be talking about, the Powell memo, for the next hour or so. So for anyone that doesn't understand what the Powell memo is, do you want to kind of quickly explain it?
Sure. Yeah. The Powell memo was a memorandum that was written by soon to be Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell. He wrote this memo, and then 2 months later, he was appointed to the Supreme Court by Richard Nixon. So this happened in 1971. Lewis Powell was a well-known corporate lawyer. He lived in Richmond. He was an upstanding member of the community, and a blue blood kind of person. He was also because he was a corporate lawyer. He was familiar with the people who worked in the Chamber of Commerce. And what happened was there was a lot of fear in the corporate community that started really occurring in the late 1960s, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But what happened was a man by the name of Eugene Snyder. He was the head of the Chamber of Commerce at that point in time. He asked Lewis Powell, what can we do about this? What can we do about all the things that are going on in the country? And in particular, why are Americans so anti-business? That was the concern, that Americans were anti-business. And the reason why I brought this up last week was because we were talking about how our society has really become kind of focused on money, and business, and I was saying that it really used to not be that way. But multiple things happened over the years that have kind of changed the way we think about things, and our whole mindset in the United States and in other countries as well. And one of the things that caused that mindset, I would argue, is the Powell memo. The Powell memo, what it did was it was really a plan. It was not just a an argument. It was a plan for how to change people's minds about the American business system, because they had a fear that people were anti-business. And so what Powell did, and it's the memo is actually in one of the links that I sent you, the very first link. It's the William, let's see, I think it's William and Lee school. It's actually the repository of Lewis Powell's papers. And so the Powell memo, what it did was it started out saying that the American way of business is under attack. And the reason it's under attack is because people have a really negative view of the business community and business in general. And in fact, they called it an attack on the free enterprise system. What really upset them more than anything is that these guys were, as I said, kind of blue bloods. These are people who grew up, went to private schools, went to Ivy League colleges. And through the course of the 1960s, what had happened was we had, of course, the Vietnam War was a lot of it, but there were a lot of other things that were happening in the 1960s. And many academics were very vocal about the war and about a lot of these social changes. And so what Snyder and especially Powell did not like is that the universities were teaching things that they felt were causing people to go on and criticize business, criticize the profit system. And they felt that basically that the universities, it's okay for them to, teach some a few liberal things, but they shouldn't be teaching attacking American business and the free enterprise system in their opinions. So what the one of the things that the Powell memo suggested was really focusing on universities and doing things like bringing corporations in, to have people that were involved with corporations to be more involved with academics, have the business community, specifically the Chamber of Commerce, review textbooks, and in particular, certain kinds of textbooks, like textbooks in the social sciences and in particular economics, and also history. So they wanted to make sure that what they felt was their point of view actually gets presented in colleges and universities. Another thing that they recommended was having business investment in universities, and for instance, like specifically paid chairs of in departments. So in other words, a business will pay a university to hire someone who's favorable to their position. So for instance, you might have a say I'm just making this up, but maybe a General Motors School of Management professor whose positions are not going to ever be go against General Motors because that's who's ponying up the funding. And so that was one of the things. They also suggested, he also suggested, and this is really probably one of the biggest factors, is the establishment and funding by business of think tanks that present the corporate perspective on things. And so we had these kinds of think tanks, but after the Powell memo, these things just totally exploded. And I think most people do not understand how influential these think tanks are in setting policy. Because what these think tanks do is, they're funded by, businesses, and you can't always necessarily tell who funds them, because they might be like, it might be some, say, private equity group or some finance group that's really representing a bunch of interests. So it's not always easy to tell who's funding these think tanks. But what they do is they hire people with PhDs and with law degrees, and people who are, like me, who have, high skill levels in a profession, and they just really just hire them to write papers and do things that will basically enable them to have a really impressive resume, so that these people then can go and maybe testify in court, and also testify to Congress. They can also maybe get political appointee positions, things like that. And their job is really just thinking up ideas that are going to benefit the people who fund the organization that they work for. I mean, and a lot of these things don't necessarily even get implemented. A lot of these things don't ever get implemented, but a lot of them do. And so what happens is you can have a situation where a president comes in, or Congress people come in, and they see something that they like on the shelves of the Heritage Foundation or something like that, and they'll use use those reports and things to help shape policy. And so these are ways that really have subtly affected our the policy and policymaking in the United States in ways that people don't really understand, but they ultimately are traced back to the Powell Memo.
That was good. That was a good one. I don't know if anyone else followed along, but I followed along throughout the whole freaking thing, and I absolutely agree.
I do too. Actually,
I learned that Citizens United and a lot of these NGOs were created immediately after this Powell memo.
Mm-hmm.
There was a video talking about how the media is bought out by bought out, as well as our politicians, because of this Powell memo. If you watch TV nowadays, everything's there's ads, commercials all the time. Every single commercial you see on that channel is that company paying that channel or that company channel money to put their ads on it, which means that if it's a news channel and there's a pharmaceutical company that wants to put an ad on that channel, that news company can't talk bad about that pharmaceutical company. So, and this is all because, everything, all this stuff that we hate, this corruption that feels like it's too much, that we can't bear, money wise, this dark money everywhere, or, conspiracy theories of Illuminati and, the red people and with all this money and blah, blah, blah. It's all from the Powell memo. Everything, a lot of it can be sourced back to this happening.
Yeah. As I said, too, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you, Willie?
Oh, I was going to say, sometimes when I was listening to that, what I also kind of think might have inspired the Powell memo is a book by William Buckley called God, Yell, and Man, where he thinks that academia and culture and society should be based on Christianity, conservatism, and capitalism. And that's basically what I think that's what I think of the Powell memo from the way you explained it, which is why everything is kind of messed up in this country.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is because, I, as a baby boomer, I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, and I remember what life was like then. And I would say that, we really do have a different way of thinking than we did back then. Now, when I was a kid in the 60s, this was not that far out from World War II, and it was not very far out from the Great Depression. So, my grandparents lived through the Great Depression, told stories about what life was like during the Great Depression. And our society was still deeply influenced by what had happened during the Great Depression. And, there really wasn't a focus on money the way there is now. There was much more of a sense of frugality was respected. Frugality and, making do. People you know, nowadays we even have clothing that is like, I can't remember the term for it, but it's like, you know, you can wear things a couple of times and throw it away. But that was nothing. There would have never been anything like that during those times. And, you know, even if you think about like the films that were out back then, there was a real sense of, you know, kind of, uh, stick it to the man. And you know, a real you know, a real it was kind of rejecting of this, of a lot of the status quo, or questioning a lot of the status quo. And much of this was because of the youth culture that was so prominent in the 60s, as the, you know, there were so many baby boomers. But you know, there were also things that were happening in society that were, I would argue, made our society better. We had the civil rights movement, we had the women's movement, we had the environmental movement, and then we had, you know, Ralph Nader came out, and Ralph Nader is someone that the business community really did not like, and in fact, in the Powell memo, Lewis Powell specifically mentions Ralph Nader. He was persona non grata with the business community because he called out, you know, lack of safety in cars and other consumer products. You know, and he was a really um, fearsome, you know, competitor to these for these corporations. Another thing that happened in the 1960s was, before 1960, and I can't remember what the name of the court, the case was named, but there was a case that really actually established the ability of people to bring uh, um, actions, collective actions in the courts. So before, you know, you really had to be, if you wanted to have standing in a court, you had to, you know, have a clear and distinct, like, um, a clear and distinct position. So in other words, you know, there was like a direct harm that could be, you know, could be attributable to a company. But what happened was, in the 60s, they established the ability of people to have class action lawsuits. And so the class action lawsuits enabled, you know, groups of people to say sue an airline if, you know, if there's safety standards weren't sufficient, to sue polluters, things like that. And so as a result, you know, we had this broadening of, really, of rights, and broadening of a, you know, kind of a broadening of, I would say, democracy that was happening in the 1960s, and, you know, spilled into the 1970s. But at the same time, people like Lewis Powell were seeing these things being expanded as a threat to them. And so that is much of what the Powell memo is about. So, you know, to them, it was like, you know, their way of life was being threatened because the rest of us were able, you know, to be more protected if we have, you know, a skin color that, you know, if it's because of our skin color, our sex, or, you know, our sexual preference. All these things, you know, started to basically scare a lot of the people at the top.
Mm-hmm. I agree. You got anything to say on that, Willie?
Yeah, couple of points. It sounds like a piece of the puzzle, what we call neoliberalism today. And you mentioned the Heritage Foundation, and it's kind of like the Heritage Foundation done to America in the last, you know, 50 years in a negative way. What I would say that the Fabian Society done for Great Britain in a positive way, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we don't have anything really like a Fabian Society in this country. just which is why instead of an NHS, we get Romney Care. I mean, as an example, when we decide to do something about healthcare, we have to do it in the most corporatized sort of way. And these people were for it, but they're partisan hacks, and they would have presented this anyway, but they're partisan hacks, and they were like, well, Obama took a Republican idea, and all of a sudden it became socialism. No such thing.
And the idea came from the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah.
They were the ones that wrote the report that laid all this out.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I mean by, they sit around and write up reports that, benefit their contributors. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I got the 5-minute video. It's called "How the Corporate Takeover of American Politics Began." It is from Robert Reich, but I did watch it, and it isn't bad. So don't hate me.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Corporate takeover of American politics started with a man and a memo you probably never heard of. In 1971, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce asked Lewis Powell, corporate attorney who would go on to become a Supreme Court justice, to draft a memo on the state of the country. Powell's memo argued that the American economic system was under broad attack from consumer, labor, and environmental groups. In reality, these groups were doing nothing more than enforcing the implicit social contract that emerged at the end of the Second World War. They wanted to ensure corporations were responsive to all their stakeholders, workers, consumers, and the environment, not just their shareholders. Powell and the chamber saw it differently. In his memo, Powell urged businesses to mobilize for political combat and stressed that the critical ingredients for success were joint organizing and funding. The chamber distributed the memo to leading CEOs in large businesses and trade associations, hoping to persuade them that big business could dominate American politics in ways not seen since the Gilded Age. And it worked. The chamber's call for a business crusade birthed a new corporate political industry. Practically overnight, tens of thousands of corporate lobbyists and political operatives descended on Washington and state capitals across the country. I should know. I saw it happen with my own eyes. I worked at the Federal Trade Commission. Jimmy Carter had appointed consumer advocates to battle big corporations that for years had been diluting or injuring consumers. Yet almost everything we initiated at the FTC was met by unexpectedly fierce political resistance from Congress. At one point, when we began examining advertising directed at children, Congress stopped funding the agency altogether. I was dumbfounded. What had happened? In 3 words, the Powell Memo. Lobbyists and their allies in Congress, and eventually the Reagan administration, worked to defang agencies like the FTC and to staff them with officials who would overlook corporate misbehavior. Their influence led the FTC to stop seriously enforcing antitrust laws, among other things, allowing massive corporations to merge and concentrate their power even further. Washington was transformed from a sleepy government town into a glittering center of corporate America, replete with elegant office buildings, fancy restaurants, and 5-star hotels. Meanwhile, Justice Lewis Powell used the court to chip away at restrictions on corporate power in politics. His opinions in the 1970s and 80s laid the foundation for corporations to claim free speech rights in the form of financial contributions to political campaigns. Put another way, without Lewis Powell, there'd probably be no Citizens United, the case that threw out limits on corporate campaign spending as a violation of the free speech of corporations. These actions have transformed our political system. Corporate money supports platoons of lawyers, often outgunning any state or federal attorneys who dare stand in their way. Lobbying has become a $3.7 billion industry. Corporations regularly outspend labor unions and public interest groups during election years, and too many politicians in Washington represent the interests of corporations, not their constituents. As a result, corporate taxes have been cut, loopholes widened, and regulations gutted. Corporate consolidation has also given companies unprecedented market power, allowing them to raise prices on everything from baby formula to gasoline. Their profits have jumped into the stratosphere, the highest in 70 years. But despite the success of the Powell memo, big business has not yet won. The people are beginning to fight back. First, antitrust is making a comeback. Both at the Federal Trade Commission and the Justice Department, we're seeing a new willingness to take on corporate power. Second, working people are standing up. Across the country, workers are unionizing at a faster rate than we've seen in decades, including at some of the biggest corporations in the world. And they're winning. Third, campaign finance reform is within reach. Millions of Americans are intent on limiting corporate money in politics, and politicians are starting to listen. All of these tell me that now is our best opportunity in decades to take on corporate power at the ballot box, in the workplace, and in Washington. Let's get it done.
I love the little pep talk at the end of it. But I mean, I think that was a really kind of good, visual example of what the Powell memo was. Do you agree?
Yeah. No,
Absolutely.
I agree. I think that was good.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that was good. It talked about Citizens United and about lobbying, even a couple things that I missed as well. So you just see the more and more you watch it, the more, not just this, but like even other ones, there's not very many YouTube videos about the Powell memo. I just want you to know there's like 6 or 7 and that's it. Like not very too many, but every time you watch it, you learn like something else that the government has, or these corporations have, locked in with their money and stuff, which if you think about it really in like the bigger picture, you're like, you understand the macro of things. Like if you step back and look at the bigger picture of America, this is just another addition to like, out of our, hundreds of years of existing as Americans, of this like rich getting what they want, laissez-faire politics type thing. Especially laissez-faire was the word that really stuck out to me when I watched it. From a lot of things I remember from, the 1800s, the 1700s, like they didn't want the government stepping in. They wanted people to make their own decisions. And that's pretty much what laissez-faire politics is keeping the government out of the hands of what we're doing in their daily lives. And it seems like this is another thing, this Powell memo, Citizens United, lobbying, corporate lobbying and all this dark money and stuff is just another form of, laissez-faire. Like we're going to do it in a secret way that the people can't fight and win back. So that way we can get what we want and keep the government out of our hands.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what's interesting about Citizens United is that there's been a slight change in conservative attitudes on Citizens United, and actually for the wrong reasons. I mean, they're right to be against Citizens United, but the reasons some of them are turning against it is wrong. When they're complaining about businesses, they're complaining about woke corporations. I mean, they're complaining about, oh, well, this company, they celebrate Pride Month. How dare they? Or this company, they're having, this is the kind of stuff that upsets them. And so this is what they hate about Citizens United, that a company can be socially progressive, and how dare they? But let some workers try to exercise their free speech by forming a union, then it's like, well, it's time to go and crack down on free speech there, So they're kind of hypocrites on that question.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't help that like social media nowadays, you got like Wendy's and McDonald's and Burger King duking it out on Twitter for like an hour, like as if they're real people or something. So that doesn't help either with the people. People think that corporations are people, which that never made sense to me either. Like every person that works in a business gets their own vote as it is. Why are you giving the top CEO and its board extra votes like of what they want? Like all you're doing is giving them more power than the one vote that we should have as a democracy anyway. It makes no sense.
Corporations don't have inherent rights.
Right.
Corporations are a creation of the state. And a corporation, to be allowed to form a corporation is, that's it's something that is permitted. It's not a right that they can have. And, so I think one thing is that, we as people should really try to recognize that corporations should be formed, they're, because they're a creation of the state. There's no reason why we can't expect corporations to be formed in a way that is beneficial to society. I mean, you can say, well, of course there's profit motive, but that doesn't mean a corporation has the right to violate laws, to undermine democracy or anything like that. A corporation is formed, it's given that a charter, you know, as a what's the word I'm trying to think of? It's a, not a favor. What's the word I'm trying to think of? I'm sorry.
What, like a IOU?
No, I mean, it's a gift that's given to them. That's not the right word, but it's it's a benefit that is bestowed upon them. It is not a right,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's not something that they have inherently the right to do. So there's no reason why you
Good
can't.
way of looking at it.
Yeah, there's no reason why you can't create a system where corporations, yes, they can benefit their stakeholders, they can benefit their shareholders, but we could easily say, but you can't harm communities.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think about it, just think about the way corporations operate anymore in this country. They really are like, they're like, it's almost blackmail the way they treat like localities and stuff. Well, how much? What are you going to give me if I want to have a build? If I want to build a business here, if I want to build my factory here, what are you going to give me? You know,
Yep.
what kind of,
Yep. What kind of tax write-offs are you going to do? All that. Yeah. Like Amazon has proved that multiple times.
And they play against each other. They play, different like states or different communities against each other, and it's really just like a form of blackmail in a way. It's just it's just awful.
Yep.
So but one thing I wanted to say is throughout the 1970s, you tended to see more and more things that I would say caused the upper classes to be more and more afraid and more disturbed about the way things were going. So, for instance, in the 1970s, we had increased competition from, as Japan and Germany and other countries rose up after the destruction of World War II. We started seeing more competition in trade. So that was a scary thing. The stock market didn't really go anywhere in the 70s. So, it was not a good time to be a well-to-do person. And then the other thing is that when inflation kicked in, for the most part, the workers were pretty well protected because there were so many unions in the U.S. at that point in time, and they would negotiate cost of living wages and cost of living increases in their contracts, and that helped other labor to also be able to get that, to stay competitive. So what happened was throughout the 1970s, it's not that labor didn't suffer from inflation, but I would say that labor probably benefited more than management did, it on a relative sense in terms of who was actually paying for inflation. I think the well-to-do got hit harder. Then what happened was they got their revenge in the 1980s. It's been downhill ever since.
Yep.
They sure did.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still fighting for unions to this day. So
we're fighting for unions, and I mean, I remember even at a union meeting, people at my previous job, people complaining about they were saying at a union meeting how everything is so horrible and they want to leave the union. I got really angry at the union meeting. I told them, you know what? You're just telling management and you're telling the company, you're right. Give us more disabuse.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
much. It's amazing how there are people out there that we have this misery imposed on us in this economy, and they just can't see the light on. You need an organized labor movement to be a barrier against the abuse of corporations and management, and they still don't see that. I mean, it's like we like not having rights at work. It's like it's kind of like we like being abused. I mean, that's almost the mentality that they have.
Yeah.
They've been conditioned that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we'll look at the videos we were watching last week of those CEOs saying that that we have to suffer. We should be suffering and we should be feeling the pain, and we're getting too egotistical. And then you got a video later today about Nikki Haley saying the same damn thing, that, unions are getting too, like, I don't know, puffy with their chest or whatever. And they're starting to, want to get more than what they deserve. It's like, we still got it out there. It's still there. And it sucks. It really, really sucks. And it's crazy to learn that it's just from this stuff right here.
You compare that to the Nordic countries where 9 out of 10 workers belong to a labor union, and they have the highest standard of living in the world. And that's what the criteria I go by when I look at Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and places like that, where 8 out of 10 workers, 9 out of 10 workers belong to a labor union. And, they pay a lot of taxes, but they also have free medical care and they're just taken care of beyond our wildest imagination. Not even the most bold liberal elected in office could even dare to do what some of these folks would do in a good way over there.
One thing, you bringing up the way people tend to, allow themselves to be kind of treated badly. One thing I really hope, I send along the links, and then I believe you're going to be posting those links. One of the links is a link to the actual Powell memo, and I really hope that people read it, because when you read it, it is really, when I first read it, and this was a few years ago, and maybe I was just extremely naive, but I was so shocked when I read it, because it just hit me. It's like, this is a business plan to like, make life worse for people. And you really, when you read it, you can really get the sense of superiority that these people, people like Lewis Powell have, and the lack of respect for the average person. So that's one thing. And I really hope that people read that. There's also a video. There's several videos. There's a couple of videos by Sheldon Whitehouse, him giving a speech on the Powell memo on the floor of the Senate. There's also a video that has Chris Hedges interviewing someone who just recently wrote a book about now I'm sorry, I can't remember what the name of the book was. Okay, let's see, what was that again? I'm sorry, I gotta look. Who just recently wrote a book, and this book is really kind of it's a great sort of like the book is called The Silent Coup: How Corporations Rule the World. And it was an interview with Chris Hedges. The author's name is Matt Kennard, but he was one of the authors. There's also a woman that was also who wrote that. The video kind of shows that, like, the end result of the Powell memo, because it's really about now what our government is really like with respect to how corporations just run the show. So I think that's a really good video to watch.
What's interesting? What's interesting on how is I sort of linked this Paul Menemo in changing the how they changing the culture, economic culture of this country, how it affects also the media and educational institutions. Like I remember my dad read The Other America in the early '60s when he was, and my dad got his BA in economics, by the way, and he read The Other America written by Michael Harrington, which was recommendation of what to do about poverty in America back in the early '60s, and and that was not controversial back then, but in 2003. Nickel and Dime in America and Not Getting by Barbara Einreich was recommended reading in many universities, and all of a sudden that was like, oh no, Marxist indoctrinations at the university. Barbara Einreich is not, she's not a hardcore, when she was alive, she was a hardcore communist. I mean, she was a pretty moderate social democrat, pretty much. And then if you look at newspapers, decades ago, they had a labor section in newspapers. You don't have a labor section today to see what's going on with what unions are doing. So something that's, to me, I kind of link all that to that Paul memo. I mean, that's, you could see that kind of change right there.
Yeah. And he specifically talked in the memo about media. That the media, in his opinion, media wasn't fair to business, and he recommended that business people really kind of he really try to represent themselves, or try to make or complain if they're not getting the kind of coverage that they think they should. He really, he was basically saying the American business person is too busy running their own business to be aware of the fact that there's all these other factors that are against the American free enterprise system. So American business should wake up, start putting some money into promoting themselves. He even recommended like a vice president position that that companies could establish, like a some kind of executive level position, and now they do have that. They all have like government relations people, and then on top of it they have their lobbying groups and things like that. So it's just it's just really unfortunate, and people, I really want people to be aware of the Powell memo, but not just the Powell memo, but all the implications of it. Another thing that is, maybe sometime we can talk about this because we don't really have a lot of time, but it's a logical conclusion, or a logical follow-on of the Powell memo, was that in 2014 there was a report that was put up by two professors at Princeton, Gillens and Page, and what they did was they studied the votes of Congress over a 30-year period. So they looked at all the votes. They looked at what the donations were to the Congress people voting on these things. They also looked at what the popular opinion was via polls and surveys, right? And what they found was Congress was voting with their donors and against their constituents.
Yeah.
And so this is a direct result of the increase in influence of the corporate of corporations and the corporate entities. So And finally, let me also say that the one of those right wing think tanks is the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and they recently actually wrote a report in which on the Powell memo, because we had the 50th anniversary of it in 2 years ago, and
Jeez.
and so they wrote a report in which they claim that, really it wasn't all that bad, and that it really was just
Okay.
he was just representing business, and it was, and the liberals are they just are paranoid.
Yeah, no, that's
I mean,
crazy.
we're not.
There isn't like there's not an academic out there that can like do research and study on this to show that, okay, yes, that is companies' rights to be able to ask for fairness. But when equity gets thrown into the trash for the benefit of rich people, just like it's always been in history, somebody's got to do like a research on this to show that this is not benefiting the regular people and this is not fair at all.
Well, I think the Gillens and Page paper is a good start for that.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so but I did include it on that list in case anybody wants to look at it.
Okay.
But I would tend to disagree, but it's nice to at least offer an alternative.
I guess it's not so bad if you want to compare it to not being thrown off of helicopters like they did in Chile. I mean, I guess in that regard, but
Yeah.
Jeez.
Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention about Lewis Powell is he was a supporter of Robert Bork. And so, he was also one of the people who was one of the Supreme Court justices that favored basically a more lax enforcement of antitrust legislation, which Robert Reich actually got into in his video. But Powell was one of the people. He wrote, I think, one of the first, and I can't remember what the name of the case was, but one of the first cases that basically kind of opened the floodgates to allowing us to stop, to not enforce antitrust. He wrote that case. So so he was not helpful with antitrust either.
Right. Yeah, and so this Powell guy, just really quickly, so he was from what I read, he was a lawyer, right?
Right.
And then after he wrote this memo, he got put into the Supreme Court. So he was never like a judge ever once.
I don't believe so.
I thought you had to be a judge to be a part of the Supreme Court.
I don't think so. I don't think you even have to be a lawyer to be part of the Supreme Court.
I think that's correct.
Interesting. But you have to go through like tons of hours to be a hairdresser. That's wild. Okay. That's wild to me. I'm sorry. That's crazy. I always thought that like to be a Supreme Court judge, you had to at least have some experience of being a judge because you're kind of balancing, and you would need the experience for that. But I guess not. So then when he was Supreme Court judge, I read that he died in 1998. Who took his spot?
Oh, I don't know. It could have been Stephen Bremer. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Breyer, that was his. Sorry, Breyer.
Breyer. Okay.
It was under Bush. Breyer was under Bush. Bush won.
No, in the
98,
90s, it would have been Clinton.
Yeah. It said he died in 1998. That's what the Google shirts are showing. So I try to Google like who took a spot afterwards, but it keeps bringing up this other Lewis Powell in like the olden times that was murdered or something.
Oh, yeah, that other Lewis Powell. He was one of the people that was in
an American Confederate soldier who attempted to assassinate William Henry Stewart.
Yeah.
He
was part of the group that assassinated Lincoln.
Oh, okay.
And his job was that when there were some that were assigned to kill Lincoln, and he was assigned to go kill Seward. But I think he stabbed him or something, but he didn't.
Okay. Okay. So then when this guy died in 1998, it was Clinton that was the president. So it was probably more a Democratic person that took his spot.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to figure out, like, everybody's talking about now how our Supreme Court system or our Supreme Court justices is super conservative, and we used to be really liberal. But I mean, like, if this guy was in there, obviously, there was somebody in the Supreme Court that wasn't very liberal. Like, is there a time, was that when he was in Supreme Court, was that a time where it was like majority liberal or majority conservative?
In the 1960s, the court was quite liberal, and I think probably in the 50s too, because that's when you had Brown versus Board of Education. It was the Earl Warren Court that I believe was in the 50s, and it was definitely in the 60s. And then Earl Warren died, I believe, maybe late 60s, early 70s, and William Rehnquist took over, who was a conservative.
Warren Burger.
Oh, I'm sorry, Warren Burger.
Yeah.
And then, but it was the Earl Warren Court that was the court that established the Miranda rights. That was the court that also allowed class action lawsuits, and I believe that was probably also the court that had Roe v. Wade.
No, that was actually the Burger Court in '73.
Oh, okay.
The Burger Court was like a kind of it wasn't as liberal as the Warren Court, but it was certainly less right wing than the Rehnquist Court. I mean, the court went really further right when Rehnquist took over. That was my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But it was going kind of right in the latter time period when Reagan came along. That's when the court started going far right.
Right.
But it started with Nixon.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've just been kind of slowly going more and more right. There hasn't been a period, even when Clinton or Obama was president, that we kind of maybe liberal just a slight.
Well, they may have added one or two people, but it didn't really help that much. And like Stephen Breyer, he's supposed to be liberal, but he wasn't really that much. He tended to favor more a lot of business things. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg, like, these people weren't like strong on anti-corporate things. So
obviously.
So I would say basically, Clinton would have been our first chance to really turn things around, but Clinton was a neoliberal, and so he didn't really do that.
Right.
The only thing that a Democratic president can do in terms of courts is maybe they may be socially more liberal on the social issues, but that's probably the best you're going to get out of them. On economics, not so much. They're going to be kind of corporatist types. Like your typical Democrats in Congress.
Just like all politicians, they're all just bought out and paid for. So,
I've actually thought about how to deal with the Supreme Court, where to slow down the right. I know that FDR basically threatened to expand the courts back in the 1930s, which kind of scared the courts a little bit, and they kind of said, okay, we'll go ahead and okay some of these New Deal legislation. The Supreme Court back then were kind of like trying to stop FDR's New Deal reforms. Joe Biden does not have what it takes to. He's no FDR.
Yeah.
I know there are people out there trying to make him out like he's some kind of FDR. Hardly. I mean, it's an insult to FDR to do that. I was thinking threaten the courts with expansion, or maybe retroactive term limits for Supreme Court justices. I think that might, like a 10-year term or something.
Yeah.
What do y'all think of that?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I mean, it's the only thing that seems plausible enough. I mean, because I don't think, like, I would agree with term limits, but then, like, you know, how presidents are, if we had a Supreme Court justice that changed every 4 years, we're never going to really get a change. But like maybe a 10-year one would probably be doable, because like every 10 years or so, the generation kind of changes a little bit, and thought processes change, and, you know, social thought thinking changes as well. So yeah, maybe like a 10-year would probably be okay with me. I'm still okay with age limits too. That would be really nice. Like I don't mind like 55, 60, but once you hit like retirement age, get the fuck on. Go retire. Go to a vacation to an island, have some fun, drink some margaritas.
I also think that, you know, we should, you know, as we were saying earlier, you don't necessarily have to be, you don't have to be a judge or even a lawyer to be on the Supreme Court.
That too. Yeah.
So why not start bringing in some other groups? Why not have consumer activists, consumer advocates?
Ooh.
Why not have you know, somebody who specializes in labor on the court? Why not look at representation of a broader representation of American society, in a professional sense?
I like that.
So I think it would be nice to have a variety of interests rather than having justices whose, you know, only things are like, are you going to be against abortion or for abortion, or
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, if there's not going to be any requirements to become a Supreme Court judge, then yeah, I mean, let more people with different types of professionalism when it comes to at least weighing the good and the bad of things in life to have an opinion in that. Or like what I brought up on there that Hirsch was saying, that would be really great to be able to vote for him. That would be really, really nice, having the people vote. Yep. I mean, if anything, even if, you know, everyone decided, oh, put more people with different opinions and different experiences in the Supreme Court, at least have them have, like, you know, at least 10 years of experience of being a judge. That way, and then let us vote for it. So that way we have public information and knowledge of their cases and how they judged. And that way we can know what to vote for and who to vote for based on how they were judges.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea.
I mean,
so there are lots of different things that we could think about in terms of making the Supreme Court more democratic, more representative of the public, more fair, and, you know, and not people who go around getting all kinds of like nice vacations.
Yeah.
You know,
what's that Supreme Court judge right now too? What's that Supreme Court judge right now that's like in so much trouble with all that free stuff?
Thomas.
Clarence Thomas. Yeah.
But it sounds like they all do it.
Oh, so, of course.
You know,
yeah, of course. They're just picking on the one person, you know, the person of color, just to make it look bad. You know, it's still racist politics in my eyes. They're all doing it. I mean, if Powell was doing it that long and RBJ let him, you know, allowed him to do that, like, I'm pretty sure, you know, or Ruth Bader Ginsburg allowed him to do it. I'm pretty sure she was bought and paid for.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
I don't want to hear nobody yelling at me about that.
Yeah, I've heard, I can't remember what it was, but I've heard that she was in on it too. And it sounds like Robert's wife, you know, gets all kinds of goodies, and, you know, so.
Absolutely.
Ain't nobody in government honest. That's right, Bulla.
Or is it? Oh, yeah.
Very
I
true.
know. True.
Yeah.
I know.
Except me.
Yeah, but you're not willing. You're not a willing government worker.
actually, you know, I've had really good experience with my fellow federal employees. So I think most of the people that work in the government are really dedicated. We just have these politicians that we have allowed to just run amok. So
I agree. So last question. what do you think could be, so obviously antitrust stuff, this Powell memo, which is what we were talking about in the first place. Like, what do you think could, because a lot of us, especially myself, we want to feel like, a little bit of action here and there is going to lead to something bigger. But, after years and years and years of doing little things and nothing happens, you kind of feel like you're just one person, and you can't really do much of a change. So what is something that you think that a regular person could do to help at least spread the word or get people to know that this is out there and at least be able to try to solve it in some way, shape, or form?
I would say actually read this stuff. See what actually was happening. Because I've talked to so many people about the Powell memo, and so few have actually read it. But if you read it, then you know what it's saying, and you understand the mentality and the thinking, because that kind of thinking it hasn't ended. It's only gotten worse. They've gotten more empowered. I think people need to be aware that, I think we tend to give people in power a lot more benefit of the doubt than they deserve, because we associate with our workers and our family, and the people that we deal with for the most part are nice people, and uh you don't really see you don't really live around people who love power and love money to
Right.
such a sick extent.
Right.
But I think, you know, read the Powell memo, read this stuff, read the Trilateral Commission report, read this stuff and see what they were actually saying, because and this stuff has been implemented. Listen, that watch Chris Hedges, that interview that you have below. Read the book of the person that's being interviewed, and try to talk to people. I haven't been real lucky about because I have a tendency to just kind of harangue people.
Yeah.
But I'm sure other people can talk about these things and hope spread the word in a little more pleasant manner than I probably do.
Oh, you're great. You're great. Also, unionizing too. I think that the recent empowerment of unions is definitely something that's highly needed. When these politicians go out and say that, we need to be reminded of who we are and stuff, don't listen to them. They're just afraid that we're actually going to get the power that we really deserve and should have had and kept in the first place, that we allowed these guys to trick us into giving up. So, if anything, we've been tricked and duped by these people, and it's time for us to get ourselves out of that corner that they've been pushing us into and start to fight back a lot more.
Yeah. We do have a lot more information now. I never heard of the Powell memo. It was something that was around when I was a kid, and I never heard of it until, really like probably about 15 years ago. But now, with the internet, you can get access to it. You can just Google the Powell memo, and there is a lot of information up about it. You can read it, and you can read evaluations of it, and most of them are not favorable.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, why the Competitive Enterprise Institute decided to weigh in.
Yeah, the couple of videos that I've seen, like there's a politician that was talking about how bad it was, and then I had the Robert Reich video of how bad it was. I saw one video of how good it was, and it was some dude who, probably goes and drives a Bugatti and is red pilled or something, that was talking about how great the Powell memo was, and I was like, oh, okay, like an Andrew Tate wannabe type dude who probably loves like, buying up $1 million homes and reselling them for $4 million. So.
And keep in mind that the Powell memo wasn't the only thing. It really wasn't the only thing. I mean, it did create, Lewis Powell. It wasn't just his memo. Lewis Powell also had a lot of influence, and he did a lot of the things that led to problems nowadays. But there were other things. There was a general census of, they called it too much democracy. That was something I think was in the Trilateral Commission. There's just, there was, I would say, probably after after the Great Depression and World War II, you know, there was this kind of momentum that continued into the 70s. But by the end of the 70s, the world had changed and thinking had changed. And a lot of uh, I would say, a lot of the attitudes that maybe served in the past were no longer serving, or were no longer fashionable. Um, and so what happened was we just started seeing these changes coming about, and those people who were able to take advantage of it, and many of the people um, who were taking advantage of it were also people who were pushing these changes. And so
Mm-hmm.
anyway,
And then they add it to the curriculum of the schools, and then that creates generations of children who become adults that think that this is all good, and then now we're brainwashed.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but we don't have to be this way. We can, there are,
Yeah.
we can kind of harken back to the fact that there are, you know, there are other ways of living.
Yep. You guys remember that? Take that from Narcotics Anonymous. I don't got to live like that no more. There's something good that came out of NA. I don't have to live like that no more.
Well, I'm also thinking other things like, for example, this 19. I was talking to a coworker, a conservative coworker who said that he talks about all this culture wars. He's not really a bad guy, but I mean, he talks about the culture war stuff, and then there's some disagreements I have with him there. He acts like society's falling apart, and everything. And I said, and he acted like this is totally new. This guy's like 23 years old. I said, "Are you kidding me?" My dad told me in the early 70s that like in 1972, people were so scared of George McGovern that they just thought that we were in the midst of a communist revolution or something like that back then. I said we're nowhere anywhere in such a situation. If you think about it, people were protesting in the 60s and early 70s, and I guess it fizzled out around the Watergate time period. And in the 80s and largely in the 90s was really hardly anything. And whenever you saw a protest, it was like 12 people protesting against whatever pet cause, and people will sit there and laugh at these progressive protesters. But all of a sudden, when the Iraq War started and the protests got large, people, largely the right wing, were getting upset. No, how dare they? How dare they are protesting? They weren't quite ready to say we got to shut them down. But now they're talking about, arresting people at protests these days, and a lot of these states are talking about having these so-called riot laws and everything, anti-riot laws. I mean, like, there's a really horrible one in Florida where Governor DeSantis wants to allow basically right-wingers to murder left-wing protesters in the name of their own personal safety. And that's not hyperbole.
Well, a lot of protesters, like the ones in Cop City, are being charged as domestic terrorists and racketeering.
So the left is being perceived as a threat again by society, progressive, whoever you want to call anybody who's against this established order. Labor rights, anti-war, anti-racism, whatever cause there is, and people are demanding for their democracy back, in other words. And because they're demanding their democracy back, the powers that be don't like it. So now they accuse all of us on the left of being pro-censorship. Now they're being upfront. We're going to go and silence these troublemakers. I don't know. Have y'all noticed that?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, corporate people like CEOs end up owning all the politicians who make the laws, and then if we do things that they don't like, then they have pay the politicians to make laws that punish us even more. It's all about punishing the regular person more and more and more and more and more and more instead of fixing it. which would actually benefit everybody. But no, it's not going to run that way. It's just going to keep going worse and worse for us.
Yeah. So the cancel culture is being imposed. Actually, if you think about it, people talk about cancel culture. Again, it's the progressives are doing the cancel culture, and there are some of it in some weird situations, but really it's the right, it's the corporatists, it's the ruling class that's actually imposing cancel culture against people who wants that democracy back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I guess you could say a response to this Paul memo
Mm-hmm.
of everything that's wrong in our society today.
Yeah. I mean, censoring dissenting voices. Yeah. I mean, shadow banning, that's a real thing right now on social media. I mean, people don't really see it, but shadow banning is a real thing. You say one thing and like that, you know, like you post something up on Facebook that probably Facebook doesn't agree with, and nobody's going to see that post. But then 5 minutes later, you put up a meme and it's got 50 likes on it, and it makes no sense.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Say something about a certain journalist in Belmarsh prison rotting away. If I say that name, this video will get shadow banned more than, so I won't mention that name, but we know who that person is. That's an example right there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing real quick, Powell didn't mention this, but it was there was an undertone of concern about a lot of what he considered disrespect for business coming out. Well, he specifically said a lot of it came out of universities. But one of the things what he didn't say was defund universities. However, that was actually starting to happen in the late 60s, early 70s. And it was like Ronald Reagan, but there was a lot of campus activity in California, especially at Berkeley. Ronald Reagan basically said, well, maybe these people ought to spend more time trying to earn money for their education. And so, that was the start of basically defunding education. So it wasn't in the Powell memo, but it was that same kind of thinking that led to that. And ultimately now we're in this position where college is really almost unaffordable for many people.
Yep.
And we have the banks taking over the financing of college, which never was, I mean, that just did not exist when I was in college. So anyway.
That's crazy. Our world. Anyway, thank you, Sherry, for coming. How can people find you if you want them to find you?
Well, I am on Facebook, and I actually am on Twitter now. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter or on Facebook.
We got you on the description box below where you can be contacted. And we'll put some of those links on the description box either today or tomorrow.
Great.
For reference.
Yeah, great. Definitely, because it's a very big, long list. So for sure, have to put it up.
Sorry about that. I was over.
No, you're always like that. You're great. I love it. Give people enough homework to last for like 2 weeks. So I'm happy.
So,
all right. Thank you, Sherry, for coming.
If you have to pick one, pick that first one. Read the Powell memo. See what it says. So,
yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for coming. I'm excited. Thank you for being our first person.
Yeah, we are honored to have you here.
Always.
Well, I'm honored to be here.
All right. And we'll probably bring you back again because you know me. So.
Well, you guys are doing a great job. So.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Okay.
Take care.
Bye. All right.
All right. Well, that was great.
Kitty says, have a good day, Sherry, too.
All
right.
That was awesome.
I know. I love when she comes on. She always has something really good to say, and I always learn new stuff. And then I can take things that she's talked about and then actually find real articles and videos that's recent happening that pertains to that, like we were just talking about. Because the first one I want to show is your little Nikki Haley video. If anything goes with what we were just talking about, it's that video right there. It's so great to learn things from her. You end up learning historical things that still pertain to today with her. She's so smart. She's so great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I guess we better get started on that video then.
Yeah, I wanna show this one off. Go ahead and get started talking about it.
Yeah, basically Nikki Haley is, the Republican Party, and I hate to talk about it in terms of Democrat versus Republican because I hate both parties. I really do. But they will sit there and their new spin in the last few years to talk about how they represent working people. Well, I mean, Nikki Haley and Tim Scott both talked about their contempt for the working class. Like a lot of Republicans, when push comes to shove, they talk about their contempt for the working class with this nonsense of how to deal with unions, and their thing is to denounce unions and to accuse Biden, basically to make Biden sound like a better president than he actually deserved to be.
Right.
Saying that he's way too overly pro-union and all that. He's not
Right.
pro-union, but
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, if he was pro-union, please tell that to the train worker union from last
yeah, the rail workers. Yeah.
Love to see that. Okay, let's get started on this video for you. Here we go.
All right, good morning and welcome to Counterpoints. I do have to warn you on Pakistan and Ukraine.
Really good clips, so stay tuned for that. We're actually going to be talking about YouTube's decision to demonetize Russell Brand. So surely you've followed the allegations against Russell Brand, but YouTube took a pretty...
Come on, people.
Google is currently in a trial, in an antitrust trial. Like it's ongoing at the moment.
Well, let's start with news from the UAW strike. Actually, Ryan over at The Intercept, there's a great news story this morning with details about a truly hilarious development and a big development, too. Tell us what happened.
Really love it. So, yeah, we put this first element, Dan Bogus, law colleague of mine. Confused automakers braced for strike at the wrong plant. And so check out his piece. The whole thing is worth a read. But for people who are new to this kind of new tactic that's going on in labor, because they're striking all three automakers, and because the supply lines are so spread out, what the union is trying to do is strike as few places along that supply chain that gets the most attention from the executives at the big three. And what the big three are trying to do is anticipate which plants are going to be struck so that they can move things around, so that they can keep production going. If the UAW can strike only a small number of plants, yet exact a lot of damage on the big three, then they don't have to eat into their strike time. And so CNBC thought they were on to the UAW. So let's play. So this clip that we're playing here was from CNBC ahead of strike, and just roll this because we know all the story.
Let's get over to Phil LeBeau live in Detroit for an update on the ongoing UAW battle. Hi, Phil.
Scott, we have received some information from a source familiar with the UAW's plans for the plants that it will plan on striking come midnight tonight if they do not reach an agreement with Ford, GM, and Stellantis. And this is our understanding of the plants that will be announced tonight. 10 o'clock is when we will get the official announcement from the UAW. Let's start first off with General Motors, Romulus Powertrain, Toledo, Ohio Propulsion, and the Marion Metal plant in Indiana. For Ford, it's our understanding that the UAW plans to strike at the Livonia Transmission Plant, Lima, Ohio Engine Plant, and the Cleveland Engine Plant. And finally, for Stellantis, we understand that the UAW will walk out at the Kokomo Transmission Plant in Kokomo, Indiana, and the Dundee Engine Plant. We should stress, we have reached out to the UAW for confirmation that this is, in fact, is the plan. We have not heard back from the UAW.
Well, I guess it is good that he stressed they had not heard back from the UAW, because, Brian, you have a theory as to how this happened.
Well, we know that whatever the source they said that they had, this list was published in an Auto Trade Hub earlier, and probably the Auto Trade Hub, which has its sources in the auto industry, got it from a consultant working for one of the big three, and the big three bring in strike-breaking consultants who then tell this is how you're going to beat this strike. And so one way or another, this consultant winds up with bogus information that winds up with CNBC, and they should stress that they could not confirm it because every single one of those was wrong. And so what they did is that they moved things from plants that did not strike to plants that ended up striking. So at great expense to the automakers, they shut down production at a bunch of places that did not strike, moved things out of there elsewhere, and then they moved them right into the belly of a strike.
Right.
And so they created maybe hundreds of millions of damage to themselves. And it allows the UAW to keep their strike fund flush, so that because if they were all out against all three, they might only last 3 months. That's how long the strike fund can last. Now you can go longer than that if you can you belt tighten. That's what would happen 100 years ago during these strikes. And it happens. The strike fund does not 100% replace your income. So there's it's tough to be out on strike. It's easy to be on the sidelines saying, "Hey, strike, strike, strike." It's harder to be to beat the people who are actually striking. But it's harder for these executives too if now they're accidentally shutting down their own production.
Yeah, it's like a return to the dance that everybody's out of practice. But the UAW knew that they had to be tactical and strategic about this and outsmarted the companies.
It's just amazing to watch. And this is a new UAW with Sean Fain, the first elected president of the UAW. Think about that. For decades they had corrupt leaders that would be elected in these processes where there were delegates, and then the delegates would pick, and then you go back room. So this is finally somebody who's represented by, who represents the rank and file. Came in with a militant attitude. And so his new statement is, noon on Friday, September 22nd is a new deadline. Either the big three get down to business and work with us to make progress in negotiations, or more locals will be called to stand up and go out on strike. And so what he's saying there is that, look, CNBC, you botched it last time. You didn't know which ones we were going to strike. You don't know which ones are going to strike this time. And more are coming if you don't come closer. And what we're hearing about the negotiations is that the numbers are already coming way up. Like the workers are doing much better. The ghost, though, of Ronald Reagan is still haunting these conversations.
Yeah, so Tim Scott was actually asked about how he would handle the strike, hypothetically, as president. And Nikki Haley was talking to Neil Cavuto on Fox News about the situation as well. Let's roll these clips for a glimpse into how some Republicans are handling the question.
I think Ronald Reagan gave us a great example when federal employees decided they were going to strike. Either you strike, you're fired. Simple concept to me. To the extent that we could use that once again, absolutely. The second thing I would do, though, is very important. This is probably not a well-known fact. The first thing, part of the challenge that we have today with President Biden is, and I don't mean this to be disingenuous, I mean this to be sincere. I'm not sure if the words are bought and paid for, but certainly he has been...
I'm sorry. I might have it on too fast. It's only a 1.25. Y'all need to fix your ears.
By the unions. And I say that because the first bill he passed, y'all remember the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package? That only had 1% for COVID vaccines. It had $86 billion, I believe, for union pensions. Because they're making these deals.
Good.
And as a result of the deal, they promise too much, deliver too little, and the taxpayers pick up the tab.
Well, I think that's...
There they go again with the taxpayers pay the tab. Where's taxpayers pay the tab for all these wars that we've been in?
I mean, I love that our tax dollars go. I love that union pensions are being saved.
Yeah.
Good. I mean, good. I mean, I wish Biden would brag about that. I mean, he's not bragging about it. That's something he should brag about.
Yeah. I just hate when they say that, our taxes are going to go to fund something when it comes to benefiting us. So we have to look at it like it's a bad thing. But when it comes to these unending wars and dark money and all this stuff, we never say who's going to pay for that. How you people are paying for this. It just, the rhetoric just pisses me off when they say that. Because then here's like the one that I've been waiting for. Like, this woman is like, I swear to God, every time I see her face, I'm going to say it. This woman has not found a war that she doesn't like, period. Sentence done. Like, she loves every single fucking war that there has ever been, no matter what. If there is a bomb that could be dropped on innocent people, she is in the front lines ready to push that button for it to go. I swear to God, she's the worst. But then when it comes to helping people and wanting, unions to get their fair shake, workers to get their fair pay, she's going to sit here and say the same fucking rhetoric. It drives me absolutely insane.
Amazing
how she looks like Tulsi Gabbard, but her foreign policy is John Bolton.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
She does look like her. Oh my God. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Wow. She does. Okay,
most pro-union president, and he touts that he is emboldening the unions. This is what you get, and I'll tell you who pays for it is the taxpayers.
Yeah,
here, from what I understand, the union is asking for a 40% raise. The companies have come back with a 20% raise. I think any of the taxpayers would love to have a 20% raise and think that's great. But, the problem is we're all going to suffer from this. This is going to cause things to go up. And,
we're all going to suffer for this, and it's going to cost things to go up. We've already been suffering without any of this, and things already have gone up without any of this. What the fuck are you talking about? She is absolutely insane when she says this stuff, like expecting us to just sit there and blindly listen like we haven't seen this shit on our own.
She's unoriginal with her rhetoric. I mean, as problematic as Trump is, at least he knows how to talk to people like he's representing them as working class, even though he's not. I mean, give her honesty.
Yeah, exactly.
This is going to last a while. But, when you have a president that's constantly saying, go union, this is what you get. The unions get emboldened, and then they start asking for things that, that companies have a tough time doing.
That is a bizarre take.
A tough time doing. They literally had record profits every year for the last 3 years, and you're telling me they can't raise their pay wage 40%, which if 40% would only bring them back to before 2008, before the recession happened during the Obama time. So all they're doing is asking for the percentage to get them back to where they were before they lost everything and had to regain at least partial of what they lost.
Yeah, the UAW been team players all this time, and all they're wanting is just to catch up from their times of sacrifice in the past, and she's acting like it's unreasonable. I'm getting to Tim Scott, using Ronald Reagan as answer of firing the air traffic controllers, wanting to do that with the unions who goes on strike. These people.
Yeah. Saying that if they go on strike, then fire them. Oh my gosh. Like, I don't want to put people in more suffering, but all I have to say about that is, like, I really, like, I dare them to do that. And then I really hope people start realizing and fighting back, like, this is some bullshit, and like, everybody just quits. Like, the entire fucking country is just like, fuck you, we quit. And then maybe these CEOs and shareholders and stockholders will actually realize that it's not those people, them, the CEOs and the higher ups, that is keeping this companies running, GM and Amazon and all the rest of that. It's the employees who you're literally paying nothing and having them sleep in their car and get food stamps every month because they can't afford to buy food still with the paycheck that they have. Like, there's got to be like I don't want to say I want people to suffer, because I'm so sick of austerity politics. Ever since I've heard of austerity politics back when Clinton was president, I've been fully against it. But at some points, I'm like with that whole point, I'm just like, I dare you, try it, because I'm pretty sure everybody's going to say, fuck you. Everybody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it just the whole idea of unions asking too much. I mean, they don't ask too much. A lot of them, I mean, unions are as weak as they have ever been. So this arbitrary figure like 40% might sound like a lot, but it really isn't. Nope. I mean, yeah, it really isn't when you think about it. So I mean, just
right. Because they were saying the average pay of the union workers is about $28 an hour. That's average. So there's people that make a little bit more and people make a little bit less. So the average is 28. So with a 40% increase, you're just giving them like what, $40 an hour, maybe, if that. So it's just it's not like it's that much. It's just literally enough to get by barely, as because with the price of the cost of living and everything else that goes along with it. So all it is just giving them a little bit while these CEOs are making like billions and billions and billions of dollars in profit, and then they're talking about how our income is only by like profit or something like that. And it's just it drives me absolutely insane. It's like, leave me alone about my multi-billions of dollars that I made owning this company while you're making the company run, but I'm going to complain that you want a 40% increase instead of a 20%.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Well, it's amazing. The company I worked for previously, it's union. The company I work for currently is non-union, but it's owned by the parent company. And we were getting, and I'm not going to mention the name because I don't want to get in trouble. But the company, we were getting hazard pay during the days of COVID. the CEO wanted that hazard pay that we were getting. He wanted it back. Like it was going to be taken out of our wages of all the 20 companies that this parent company owned, that it was going to come back to the company, like expunged out of our wages. And they had a lot of bad press because of it. And because of that, he backed down. So when I'm no longer working for the company, I will talk about that a little more. But, as I said, I don't want to get in trouble.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of being canceled and all of that too, this week, some going on to the next story. This week, Russell Brand got some or is being accused of some essay and some really serious allegations. And there's just been like this crazy like back and forth of like people, obviously believing the women, and then, people saying that this is a conspiracy of like, corporations wanting to censor somebody because he's starting to talk out and talk against what they're doing. And it's like, I don't know. I kind of want to know like what your take and what you think on this and like what the audience thinks on this, because I am a female. I do believe women, but also at the same time, I have personally experienced where women say things that they don't, that aren't true, which doesn't particularly have to anything to do with this, but also the fact that the Guardian and the New York Times were the ones that came out with this recently, when the New York Times and the Guardian has been covering Russell Brand for years and years and years while he was a celebrity and never said anything then, are all of a sudden coming out about it now. And also or trying to, like just that fact of like it's not the women that are coming out on it, it's this companies that are coming out with these women saying it. Usually it's the females that are taking this to court over it and coming out themselves. They haven't said their names, and usually you are supposed to say a name if you're going to be suing. Also, the fact, I think it's either the Guardian or the New York Times is owned by Bill Gates. So, that's another like little red flag for me as well. So it's definitely a struggle with trying to figure it out. I'm not going to make like any kind of statement on it until something real, like evidence wise, has come out about it. So what is like your opinion on this whole situation?
Okay. On the actual matter itself, I wasn't there, so I obviously am opposed to sexual assault and rape and all of that. I mean, that's just the lowest thing that anybody can do without any question. So I mean, and so as far as I'm concerned, if he's guilty, prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. If he's not, it's fucked up. That's something they'll do this, and there would be political motivation for doing this to him. I mean, because he is a truth teller in a lot of ways that I think that there are people that would go and try to bring him down. But then again, he could be a truth teller and he could be a scumbag too that have done that. And if he is a scumbag that's actually done this to these women, again, prosecute him to the fullest letter of the law.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this video that I'm going to show right now, I think it's a really good conversation back and forth of that I think the fight with that's in all of us right now of, whether or not he is guilty or isn't. Because, like he's been super open about a lot of things that he's said about his sexual encounters in the past and stuff. And I think a couple of girls said that they were 16 years old, which in America, absolutely, that is completely wrong. But then you have to remember he's also from Britain, where the legal age limit is 16 out there. You are legally fully an adult at 16 years old. So yes, it's super freaking disgusting and horrible. I couldn't even imagine my 15-and-a-half-year-old daughter being with an older gentleman like that. Couldn't fucking imagine it whatsoever. But also that's their culture in England is 16 years old as well too. So like the age, there's like a lot of things that have to be, and that's what sucks is like we can't just sit here and believe everything the Guardian, the New York Post is saying to us, because like there's going to be a lot of things that are omitting, but then there's also these girls that are actually coming out and saying it, even though they're Jane Does, they're still coming out and saying something, and we have to at least validate them and tell them that, you know, what their experience is validated, because what if it is, you know, and you can't sit there and just tell them that they're wrong when they've experienced something. So I think this conversation is really, really good that they have, because it covers a lot of things that I haven't even brought up yet too, about this whole situation. I think out of all of them, this was probably the one that I kind of, at least with her, respect the most, because she's brought up a lot of things that at least the other side is saying as well that we have to take into consideration. So, all right, here we go.
Made last week against him, the CEO of the platform, Chris Pavlovski, pushed back on the UK Parliament's request to suspend the brand from receiving advertising revenue on its platform, posting on X, quote, "We regard it as deeply inappropriate and dangerous that the UK Parliament would attempt to control who is allowed to speak on our platform or to earn a living from doing so. We emphatically reject the UK Parliament's demands." Pavlovski expressed that while it deplores any sexual harassment of any kind, it believes that both the victims and accused deserve full investigation.
It's clear Rumble will not be following in YouTube's footsteps to demonetize Russell, and it's unclear if TikTok will follow suit. As journalist Glenn Greenwald pointed out, Caroline Dinage, UK's chair of the Culture, Media and Sports Committee, wrote TikTok's director of government relations in Europe a similar letter with the same ask, despite not having been charged with, let alone convicted of any crimes. I mean, Bree, that's crazy.
Yeah.
For the government to really start sending letters to social media companies saying, well, wait a minute here, is this guy monetized on your platform? Talk about government overreach.
Yeah, yesterday we were talking to Max Blumenthal about what would happen if the government hypothetically were involved. And at that time, we didn't know what the source of some of this stuff was. And I agree that hypothetically that would be an incredible overreach. Now we have evidence that the government of the UK is reaching out, specifically asking for its citizens to be demonetized, because not that they've been proven in a court of law that anything happened, not that they said or did anything on the site that violates the terms of service, but because of a number of allegations that have arisen from some years ago, some of which were not a secret, some of which Russell Brand had talked about or alluded to in his book, as he talked about his journey from being someone who was an addict, who had been struggling with misogyny and with other kinds of vices, to where he is today in a more kind of spiritual place. So, I mean, it is a kind of a tell, because when the story first broke, there were those that I would argue perhaps rushed to Russell Brand's defense, perhaps too quickly. Mm-hmm. I personally would take the approach of saying, well, I don't know one way or the other what happened, so let's just maintain a status quo. But in defense of him, they were arguing that he's being targeted because of the nature of the commentary that he puts out on Rumble and on YouTube, and that the powers that be want to silence him the same way that sexual assault or rape allegations were used against Julian Assange. There was a leftist congressional candidate out of Massachusetts this happened to. There was a New York City mayoral candidate that this happened to. But
are they wrong? I mean, when you have Kristen Dinage, the chair of Culture, Media and Sports, sending messages to privately owned companies.
No, I don't think they're
wrong. Not managed by the government, that aren't owned by the government, that aren't sanctioned by the government, to inquire whether or not this guy is monetized merely based on allegations. I think it feeds into this idea that maybe they're going after his political position.
That was exactly my point. Whereas initially, I think there were a lot of folks that pushed back against that and said, you have no evidence of that. Well, you have no proof of that. They're literally making the case for Russell Brand's defenders with behavior as obvious as sending a letter from a government.
Yeah. Right. And that's the kind of thing that I agree with. Like another thing that she brought up that I forgot to even bring up is the fact that like her and Max Blumenthal were talking the day before about like, you know, well, what if the government started to kind of overreach and overstep their boundaries and stuff. And then it ended up happening. We find out, you know, from I think it was, who was the guy that put the tweet up? I can't remember his name. Anyway, that guy posted the tweet showing a picture of the UK government asking Rumble to demonetize. Why is the government asking a private company to demonetize a content creator over allegations that haven't even been sentenced or have put through trial yet or anything like that? When we see, you know, I've seen registered sex offenders online saying things all the time. Like, why, they could probably be monetized as well if they got big enough. There's the 8 passengers. This lady like literally just was like practically abusing her children for the last like 5 years live on YouTube, and they just, since she got arrested, demonetized and took away the video. She was still getting paid, no problem whatsoever, but this is an allegation and they're going to completely demonetize them already, like before anything happens. Like, that's where I agreed with her, is like, you're giving people the fuel for the fire by doing this kind of stuff instead of letting it go out and go down the way that justice is supposed to go down. And why is these news companies, the Guardian and the New York Times, starting this now? Why now? Why not years ago, when he was just talking about mysticism and psychology? Why are they doing it now? There's just a lot of questions. And she brings
not
up
only not only do we lack social justice in our society, we also lack blind justice, and we need them both. I mean, we need consistency. We need consistency, and we need compassion, and we seem to lack both out of political partisan hackery and just that seems to be the thing right there. It's all about a one big gotcha, and that's what it comes down to. And for Britain to go and to demand for Rumble, who is Britain? What is another government to demand a company in another country to demonetize? I mean, who are they? Zelensky was demanding for the U.S. government to put Rand Paul, Tulsi Gabbard, and Glenn Greenwald on a blacklist, for example. I mean, who is the government? Another government. Not that I'm like the most patriotic person in the world, but who's another government to tell an American company? Well, actually, I think Rumble's Canadian, but tell a company in another country or the American government what to do. Anyway, that's kind of the way I see it. And YouTube demonetizing. Wait for a verdict. That's what I have to say. Wait till there's a verdict on this.
Right. Exactly. Why doing it now when it's just allegations from 2 news companies out of the blue, with the girls haven't even released their names yet?
Mm-hmm.
So I agree.
I don't know
ahead,
what Russell Brand did or didn't do.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, as I said, again, I want to make it clear: if he is guilty, prosecute him to the fullest letter of the law. I don't care who you are. I mean, I know the good work he's done. I mean, I like the good work he's done as far as the truth telling, but I'm not going to excuse all the good he's done with. I'm going to excuse him if he's doing this bullshit, if he is in fact guilty.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And we can't all sit here and say that this is okay that we're doing this to him when literally Chris Brown won an MTV Music Video Award this week. All right. Motherfuckers are still out there voting for Chris Brown. Just saying.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to debate that, but I do think people have a right to defend themselves. And I think we've gone too far, not only in the United States, but I think in most of the Western civilized world. An allegation is made against you, you're guilty. You lose your job, you lose your family, all of your friends walk away. And what happens when sometimes those allegations are disproven? I mean, let's think about Johnny Depp, for example. I know one of his lawyers personally, and the financial implications of what Depp went through, he's still trying to recover from that. So it doesn't matter if you prove your innocence in a court of law, you're still going to feel the ramifications financially. And these folks just don't care. And I think that people should be able to file suit against individuals who make allegations that are proven to be false.
Yeah, I think
you should be able to defend your name, Bree.
Some of the more difficult cases, I think, are the ones that play out entirely outside of the courtroom, because there is no sense ever of either validation or conviction. There's no sense, absent any kind of formal censorship by serving a jail sentence or having to pay a defamation lawsuit or whatever it is, that anyone's been punished. And when there's not really a question of past wrongdoing, I think with this Russell Brand situation, it's less that there's disbelief that he behaved badly in the past, because he's been very open about how he behaved badly in the past. The question is, absent any kind of formal punishment and outside of any sort of religious tradition or anything else culturally that would hold him accountable, I do think the ratcheting up and the punitive push from governments and social media companies to do damage against him is because we're kind of twisting in the wind, wondering, well, if they don't do this, is there any accountability whatsoever? And it shouldn't come from employers or tech companies or governments. We need to figure out as a society how we want to think about people without offloading that responsibility to the state.
Yeah, but accountability comes with an investigation.
Yes.
It comes with speaking with or to other parties who may have been around or who may have been made immediately aware of these alleged acts from Russell against these women. Then you go to potential punishment, if you will, and what that looks like. But they have usurped the entire process. The idea of justice just does not exist, obviously, in the United Kingdom. And I would go on to argue that many of our viewers would probably say it doesn't really exist in the United States either. If you're accused of something, you're just guilty. Doesn't matter if you can prove your defense or defend yourself. If we don't like you, we don't like what you're saying, you're not mainstream, if you will, you're not sanctioned by the mainstream, then you get too far, then we'll find something against you too, and we'll punish you.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the Me Too movement took a turn. And ironically, Joe Biden, I think, was the death of it. At the start of his 2020 presidential race, there were, I believe, 8 allegations of inappropriate sexual conduct that women raised. His own now Vice President Kamala Harris said at the time that she believed women. But we saw as soon as it became clear that he was going to be the Democratic nominee and the Tara Reade allegations came out, how little faith Democrats actually put in the notion of believing women. Now, I do think there's a problem with believe women. The initial impulse, I believe, came from a good place, that we've had so many decades and centuries of the presumption being against the woman when they raise claims of rape or sexual assault, that there was an effort to provide some pushback, some counterbalance to that, and have some kind of system where we there's a rebuttable presumption in favor of the woman, let's say, and like the cultural mind instead of a rebuttable presumption against her. But without an investigation, believe women means an accusation is a conviction. And we hop over any opportunity for the state to investigate if it really is a criminal matter, or for there to be any kind of reporting that investigates what's happened. And that it puts a responsibility on individuals who are just acquaintances or in the mix or on social media or whatever to weigh in as though any of us have the tools or the ability to ever know what's really gone on there outside of journalists. I mean, we're journalists.
I mean, look, as a guy, I'm going to be careful with the believe the woman thing because I know what the repercussions can be for that. But I do think if an allegation is made against someone, that person should have an opportunity to defend themselves, and a presumption of innocence should remain. I said the same thing about President Trump politically, when people are saying, well, he's made the comments, so we have it on tape, or we believe he's did all of these things he's accused of for whatever reason. And my thing is, maybe you do believe that. But the presumption of innocence is really a cornerstone of our democracy. It really is. I mean, I think about Socrates and the conversations with Socrates and Crato. And Crato kept trying to convince Socrates to flee. We can get you out of here. We can get you on a private island to escape this unfair, unwarranted sentence. And he just said, no, I have to respect the laws of this place. And I would say to people who are just so quick to say, yep, they're guilty for whatever the reason may be, give people an opportunity to defend themselves, because the presumption of innocence is critically important to what I think distinguishes us from a civilized society versus one where the government can choose any individual they want to make an example out of and say, because you did this thing wrong, you should be sentenced to some type of punishment.
So I agree. I feel like
I agree with that too. So I don't want to go too much longer because I know you got we only got a couple more minutes left and you're running out of time. So if you guys have anything to say about that too in the comments, let us know about what your opinion is. And yes, Warren, I do read the comments. I'm just ignoring it today because y'all are in your own little world up there. I see Sam and Steve and Apres Blink twice if your eyes need moisture. No, I'm good. No, I see you guys all in here. I just see y'all in your own little world out there today. So, and I see that Sam is mad at me, but I still love you, Sam Cedar.
Yeah, Sam Cedars King is here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's been in there talking shit like he always does. You know how he is.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say that, the whole thing with Tara Reid, I mean, she had to move out of the country and nobody has any empathy for her, for what she's been through. And, and she's being dismissed and all of that. They make the exception. And that's where, someone like Joe Biden, oh, no big deal. Russell Brands, go get him. People need to be consistent.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Yeah, like she was just saying the Kamala Harris thing. Like, I believe all women. Oh, I don't believe Tara Reid now because Joe's going to be our president. But then, like, all of this, what's going on now? I'm pretty sure Kamala's like, yeah, of course, censor him. I don't care.
Yeah, well, Kamala has no trouble throwing people under the bus. I mean, she's power hungry. So
Right.
Yeah.
Sam, I would never lie to you. What are you talking about? I didn't lie to you. The heck? Steve was funny. He's all, I'm sorry, well, you got our attention. Like they're all in trouble right now. Thank you all for coming. For making accusations, very rare occurrence. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you guys for coming. Steve, A-Press, Warren, I saw Hirsch in there for a little bit. Comrade Kitty with Nicole, as AKA Nicole Kidman.
Ellen was here earlier. I don't know if she's still here. And we have
Jamon
93.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Who else is here? Trying to see. Rivet Head was here. Thank you for coming and holding it up on my Twitter. Or sorry, Twitch. If you guys want to go check me out on Twitch, Vexing Vixens, 1X on each of them. Go check them out or go check us out. I'm trying to get to 100 over there.
What number are you at right now, Jimmy?
I think I'm at like 64. Slowly getting there. Slowly.
I was at 64 on Rumble, and then I got up to 130 overnight.
See, I just need you to promote me. You are the promoter. Every time you promote something, people get more follows. It never fails.
Actually, Nays Garden is the reason I ended up with 130 some Rumble people.
Oh,
Yeah.
You're mad because I said I'd dye my hair and I haven't yet. No, I gotta wait a little bit longer because I just did black like less than a month ago. So for the red to come out really well, like at least and I also just bleached this at the same time. So this needs to at least get back to normal a little bit, and then I could do the red, or I can wait and for a lot of this to come out, a lot of the black to kind of, wash out a little bit more, and then I can do red. So it's just got to take a little time because I've recently dyed my hair that I cannot dye it yet. I'm sorry. I'm going to go red soon enough, eventually, maybe. We're competing with JD, Medhurst, Gray Zone, and RBN. Aw, that's all right.
Good company.
Yeah. We're the underdogs. We're coming up in this world.
Yeah. We'll be the next heavyweight soon. Watch out, everyone. Yeah.
Yep. You were a cowboy kitty for like a week. You didn't know they'd lock it. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
dyed my hair black several months ago, and I just the summer came along, and I know what happens to my hair in the summertime, and I was just like, well, I'm going to go and just cut it all off. Now I'm growing it back, so I'm going to go back to my classic 1966 Andy Warhol look.
Nice. Yes, I like it. I like your look.
Yeah. So it'll take several months, but it's actually growing. So
yeah. Yep. It looks great. Okay. So next week we will see everybody. Don't forget to hit the like button. Yeah, don't forget to hit the like button. Tomorrow night I got mine and Warren's show. The Secret Show midnight, I believe on Sunday afternoon. I haven't figured out what time yet. I can't remember the exact time, but I will be going on to Tommy Nation Politics for an interview on Sunday. And that's all I got going on this week. What about you?
Tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, I'll be streaming. On a subject that I think I might talk about the Shank Ugard, Brianna Joy Gray rising, a conversation that they had this past week. That was very interesting, and I think I might touch on that and a few other topics. Oh, we'll see. I might drop in a surprise here and there.
Okay. Don't forget tonight too, as well. Chicago Coroner is going to be on at 8:30 Eastern. That would be 5:30 Pacific. So roughly in about an hour and a half, Chicago Coroner is going to be on. So that way we all got something to watch tonight. And then tomorrow night as well, you got the Political Matrix and Beauty and the Boomer. I can't remember what else. You all know we do the same thing every fucking weekend. So, all right, you guys, thank you all for coming. Have a good weekend. I hope to see you all soon. Thanks for the support. Don't forget to hit the like button, follow all that fun jazz, cool stuff that makes us look like we're cool and jazzy and young and, snap. Anyway, before I start blabbing, I'm going to get out of here. Bye.